Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Mickelberry, and I'm the Programs Director with the Office Alumni Affairs. I want to welcome all the Gauchos out there to kick off the third annual Gaucho Professionals Expo. This is our second Expo in the virtual environment. And although we really were hoping to be able to get together and see people face to face and have that really rich networking experience, we're so grateful to be able to be with everyone via Zoom today. Today, we're also joined in the audience by our Interim Executive Director, Samantha Putnam, and a number of UCSB Alumni Association Board of Directors, Rocio Torres, Scott Carper, Cindy Chinadu, Sergio Lagunas, Patricia Nguyen, and Joel Resnick. Thank you all for your leadership. We really couldn't do this work without you. As a reminder, this event is hosted as a webinar, and it, of course, is going to be recorded so that we can have it to share out. And as an attendee, you can submit questions in the Q&A throughout the webinar. And we strongly encourage you to do that so that by the time we get to our speakers ending and we are ready for that Q&A, we know what you want to ask. And like I said, there's going to be a short Q&A after the keynote remarks. But before we hand it over to Annalyn, I'm delighted to introduce you to our Alumni Association Board President, Michael Citron, class of 2010, who is a senior associate with Mercer. He's going to welcome Annalyn. So I'm going to kick it on over to you, Michael. Thanks for being here.
Perfect. Thanks, Julie. Really appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for joining today. It's great to see a group of Gauchos on here, and always fun to connect with Gauchos. As Julie mentioned, I am class of 2010. I'm a senior associate at Mercer, which is a global human capital consulting firm. So that's what I do in my professional life, but Julie also mentioned that I currently serve as president of the UCSB Alumni Board of Directors. And our board of directors is currently a 25-member board that oversees the Alumni Association's operations. Julie mentioned a bunch of board members who are on the call today. I also see Diane Dodds on here too, so welcome. And any other board members we may have missed, we really appreciate your leadership, and you being here today means a lot. What we do as the Alumni Association Board is we work in close partnership with the university's Alumni Affairs Department. And Julie mentioned the staff on here, so Samantha, Julie, and Soleil, they are among a group of people who are a small but very mighty staff that put on events like these, and we thank you so much for your hard work in getting Gaucho Professionals Expo and all of the events that we do off the ground today. When it comes to the association, many of you may not know that a number of years ago, we switched to a membership for all model. So by virtue of being a UCSB alumni, you are a member of the Alumni Association. And we want you to know that and feel good about that and feel a part of this organization. Interestingly, over the last number of years, probably 2-3 years, we've done some pretty significant strategic planning as an association board to define what our future vision looks like. And we've come up with an ambitious 10-year goal. And in 10 years, we want UCSB alumni, the strong alumni network that we have, to be a reason why people choose UCSB. I know that there are lots of universities that are out there that people may choose to go to because of their alumni networks. We certainly have a very strong alumni network, and we want to make it even stronger and enhance that network to make it truly a reason why people are choosing to come to UCSB. And so your support, your enthusiasm, your attendance here today really helps in enhancing that culture and in pursuing that vision. And so with that, we'd encourage you to tell your friends, this is a full week of events. Tell your friends they can continue to sign up for Gaucho Professional Network, stay involved, sign up for the Gaucho Network, which is our online networking platform. Continue to be involved so we can pursue that path and truly be a reason why people choose UCSB. So with that, I am really excited today to introduce Annalyn Cruz, who you can see is class of 2000. She is kicking off our week-long Gaucho Professionals Expo as our keynote speaker. And for over 20 years, Annalyn served as an executive and leadership coach and a facilitator and a speaker. in which she's empowered women and BIPOC leaders to pursue career freedom and the lives that they crave. Recently, Annalyn worked at Electronic Arts, where she focused on leadership and manager development, employee engagement, talent development, and DEI initiatives. And as a human capital consultant, I know how challenging that work is and how important that work is. So kudos, Annalyn, to you for really pursuing that. Annalyn's also a proud Gaucho. She majored in Asian American Studies and Sociology, was very involved on campus, serving in student government, in residential life, orientation programs, has a special place in my heart, and counseling peer services as well. And I understand that Annalyn is also a fan of Woodstock's Pizza in Isla Vista, a great choice. Today, Annalyn's keynote is going to be titled Gremlins and Saboteurs, talking about sitting with the fear that many of us hold as we pursue career shifts or leadership experiences with unknown outcomes. We have those gremlins and saboteurs within us. And the one thing I know is that change is constant. We'll always face our gremlins and our saboteurs. So Annalyn, we're looking forward to hearing your perspective on how we can persevere through those challenges and continue to pursue our goals. So with that, Annalyn, I will turn it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Michael. I really appreciate the introduction, and it's so exciting to be here with all of you today. So I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen here and share my screen, and crossing my fingers it all works well. And just a second. Julie, can I get a verbal confirmation that it's all good?
It looks great.
Perfect. All right, everybody. So welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, depending on where you're logging in from or when you're watching this recording. I welcome all of you, and thanks so much for joining me in my talk. My name is Annalyn Cruz. I'm the CEO and founder of my company called Grounded in Wisdom. And as Michael shared, I'm a leadership and executive coach, a facilitator, and professional speaker. And that's the what of what I do. In my hour here with all of you, I'm going to be talking more about the how and the why of how I've gone about, exploring my own leadership, career, and life journey here with all of you. I'm so excited to be the keynote speaker for this, third annual Gaucho Professionals Expo. And, I'm so excited to share my keynote here with all of you. And it is entitled Sitting with the Fear and the Gremlins That Hold Us Back. And we'll get into all of that, what that means in just a minute. As Michael mentioned, I'm representing the class of 2000. Whoop, whoop. I'm a proud Asian American Studies and Sociology double major. And here's the deal. One of the greatest blessings that happened to me in my life was my undergrad days at UCSB. And I'm sure that many of you can relate to that. I have such fond and amazing memories at my time here in Santa Barbara. And some of the most exponential growth that happened to me was during the 4 years that I was there. So I know that October, it's not lost on me that this is also Filipino American History Month. And I'm so honored to be here to be your keynote speaker to kick off the week and share parts of my story with you today. If you would have told me 25 years ago that I'd have the floor and the mic to address and share parts of my story with all of you, to my fellow alums and some of my peers, and I know some friends and family are out there in the audience today, I don't know if I would have believed it back then. But I have to say that my 18-year-old self, freshman in Anna Capel Hall, would be proud today. So here's the journey that I'm going to take you through. You'll learn a bit more about me, how parts of my story is relevant for your own life, and you'll start to learn about what is this term that Annalyn's talking about in terms of gremlins and the messages that they send each and every one of us. We'll then take a look back on parts of my past, both the early years and then my time at UCSB, and how I slowly started to discover my own inner wisdom. And finally, I'll share my top 5 tips with all of you and end with some Q&A with Julie she'll lead us through that. All right. So you'll learn through my stories, and that my arc is going to be obviously very different from yours, right? We all have our own journeys, not only in our careers, but in our adult lives. So we're constantly evolving. So while our paths may look different, the great thing about this expo is that we can continue to learn from each other as a Gaucho community. And when I started thinking about my keynote, I took time to deeply reflect on all of the different identities and intersectionalities about me. And I started to really dig into what these really mean to me and how it's shown up in my life journey so far. And I realized again how important it is to take that time out to reflect and to take the time out to reflect on where I've been and where I'm going. Again, not only in my career, but what I want for my entire life. I launched my company this past year called Grounded in Wisdom. And here's a snapshot of my website. And I made a huge leap of faith for my career and my life when I left my corporate job at Electronic Arts, or EA for short. I left EA this past July after being there for 5 years. And I had a dream a few years ago to open up my own business and work for myself, to really focus in on the type of work and the clientele that bring me the most fulfillment and engagement. As I mentioned earlier, we all have our own journeys. And my path led me to explore my own calling and to own my business in order to do that. So I understand that this is not everyone's path. So that being said, the messages that I'll share here with all of you today can perhaps resonate with all of you and play out in a variety of different ways, as you can see here on this slide. And consider if one of these, or maybe a couple of them, resonate for you. So one of the pro tips I have for you is to take time to reflect and explore. So I'm going to actually ask each of you to do that right now. And the reflection question I have for all of you is, what's a dream that you have for yourself? And go ahead, if you're at your desk or you have your phone, I want you to literally type it out or write this down somewhere. So this could be related to a career goal that you have for yourself. Maybe it's stepping into a bolder leadership role or having more confidence at work, or maybe it's like picking up the ukulele and learning how to play that. So this is a dream that is so important to you that perhaps it's keeping you up at night. I know that my dream was doing that for me. And in fact, it could be getting louder as the days continue. So I want you to pick one that is kind of giving your stomach a little bit of knots. So go ahead and write that down. And let's follow up with a deeper reflection with a follow-up question. What's an obstacle that's preventing you from pursuing that dream? So this could be the voice in your head that's telling you it's not possible, it's not realistic, or it'll take too much time, or I've invested too much in this company or in this organization to walk away now, right? So I want you to get really clear on what's holding you back and the message that's being communicated to you. And I'll bet that some of these messages about yourself and your circumstances are likely preventing you from pursuing that dream. So who are these voices? Well, for the sake of this presentation and keynote, this is who I'm going to be referring these voices are. They are the gremlins, your saboteurs, your imposter, or your inner critic. To me, they're all one and the same. And they could often bring about feelings of self-doubt, of fear, of indecision. And these are voices in our heads that often keep us small. And, they do serve a purpose in our reptilian brain. They keep us safe from danger. This is often why they show up. And Dr. Brené Brown, who many of you may know, states that gremlins often show up as shame, right? We all have it. It's that gremlin that says, I am not enough. Or if you're feeling pretty confident, it's, ooh, who do you think you are? Mm-mm. Shame always has a seat. So where do these voices come from? They can stem from family members, parents, folks that you grew up with in your younger years. I know that my dad always used to tell me, you know, just get a safe job with a pension and benefits, one with status, right? Don't rock the boat, don't argue with your boss. Those are the things that matter. And for him, that's what he was used to culturally and generationally. Okay, so these gremlins can be relentless. So here are just some of my personal favorites. And yes, these are what have shown up in my life. Things like, what if you make no money doing what you love? Or why do you want to change things when they're actually pretty good right now? And my personal favorite, you know, now's just not the right time. So when you think about these messages and the obstacles that are holding you back, I want you to do a deeper reflection right now. And I want you to consider, how are these messages serving you so far? And they may have served you well in the past for whatever reason. So perhaps you had some family obligations that you needed to tend to, or maybe there are certain steps that you want to take within your own process before you jump and take that leap of faith. I get that. I've been there. Here's another question for you. I want you to think about how these gremlins messages are impacting your emotional and mental well-being. And I want you to really sit with that. And some of you may have a visceral reaction happening right now. I know that when I often thought about the dream that I had for myself and making that big leap and the things that were holding me back, I would often feel a lump in my throat or feel myself about to tear up. And that is normal, right? If you're feeling something right now, it's because that dream is so important to you. So just sit with that, okay? And we're going to bring this back home at the end. I'm going to ask you this once again. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and transition us now so you can learn a bit more about my journey and how all of these experiences in my life have affected who I am today, and how all of my identities and leadership experiences really allowed me to get clear on the type of career and life that I wanted to build for myself, and the type of leader I wanted to be, not only in the workplace, but in my holistic life. So I grew up in Southeast Los Angeles in a little city called Bell, California. It has a population of about 35,000 people. And I was born and raised in the US, in California specifically. So I'm considered first generation. And here I am with my sister, Lisa. So you could see even back then I was a little bit feisty. And my parents immigrated from the Philippines in the early 70s, and they were the strictest out of all my parents' friends. So you can imagine how tough that was. And I learned how to navigate between two worlds, one which was being Filipina and the other which was being American. And yet I never quite completely fit into either culture. I was made fun of for the way that I looked and for being different. And I was one of the only Asian kids in my entire school from about kindergarten all the way until 9th grade. And I remember my first encounter with racism was at the age of 5. And I was in kindergarten, and I remember being in the restroom with another little girl. And she came up to me and ran up to me and said, "Chinita, Chinita," and would like slant her eyes. And I didn't understand the full context or what was really going on at the time, but what I did understand was being different was bad. And this teasing and bullying continued for many years. And I often wish that I looked differently or that I could just blend in with the crowd so that I wouldn't be made fun of. And here's what my gremlin said to me for many of my younger years, which was, you'll never feel like you belong. And you don't, because you're too different. So how did this message affect me during my earlier years? I spent the next few years just trying to fit in. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And back then, in my opinion, being different wasn't really something to be celebrated, unlike now. And I wanted the Saved by the Bell, 90210, Sweet Valley High experience. This was predominantly what was in the media back then and what I had access to. So it really influenced what I thought my life was supposed to be like. Unfortunately, I also spent a long time hating the way that I looked based on my phenotype, my racial and ethnic and cultural background, my weight, etc. And the media did not help with this either. So these were some of the headlines and the anecdotes that I would often see in teen magazines that my sister and I would look through. And they were targeted at young women and young girls to change ourselves, to be different and not like who we were. And these were very difficult times. And I'm sure some of you in the audience can relate to what I'm saying here. So there was a cost of blending in and assimilating. I took pride in being, not being one of those Asians who only primarily hung out with other Asian students in my high school. And I was totally judgmental. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I have, friends of all sorts of different backgrounds. And somehow that made me feel better about myself. And I didn't understand for many of my fellow Asian peers, along with other students of color, that they did this as a means of survival and a sense of belonging. And I get that now. So also during this time, I wanted to serve on student government in high school. And my gremlin told me that I wouldn't win because it was based on popularity. So being on the dance team, as you could see here, was one of the instances, one of the few, when I stepped up into a more visible role, but I was still trying my best to fit in and find my own voice during that time. And this is what my gremlin told me. And this kept being reinforced time after time with the message of just fit in with everybody else. That's how you're going to be accepted. So fast forward to my senior year of high school, and I was getting ready to decide where I was going to go to college. And like many of you, I went and visited campus during Spring Insight that quarter, and I was so excited. And the lead singer from Toad the Wet Sprocket, I know I'm dating myself here. So the lead singer from Toad was playing in Stork Plaza that day. And for all my 90s folks, you know who I'm talking about here. So while I was over the moon to get accepted and to decide to go to UCSB, my gremlin showed up again. And this time it was saying, are you really going to succeed here? And what if you never fit in at UCSB either? And here's when things started to shift. I had my first awakening while I was at UCSB. I took my first Asian American Studies course called Gender Relationships with Dr. Diane Fugino, who's second to the right in this picture, one of my all-time favorite professors at UCSB. I was in awe with her fierceness, her knowledge, and the way the class curriculum connected to me with parts of myself that I didn't even know existed. I didn't know any of the history of how Asian Pacific Islanders were being portrayed in Western media. And I didn't know about all the sexism and gender stereotypes that were out there for men, for women, for non-binary folks of Asian descent. And I remember being angry of how I started to learn all of this knowledge for the first time and reckoning with the fact that I had this deep-seated fear of being seen as different based on what happened in my life early on. And that fear equated to not being good enough. It was at this time that I started to realize some of these really painful feelings of internalized racism and oppression that was deep within me. And I sat with this gremlin and these painful feelings for a while. And I remember thinking it would be a good idea to visit counseling and psych services to try and work through some of this. And part of me was hesitant to talk about this to someone professional, right? And to know about what I was struggling with. And I can't tell you what a gift it was that my inner wisdom, my intuition just knew when I needed to reach out to someone professionally to get some help on this. So while I was working through my own inner gremlins and their messages to me, I also began to discover my own inner leader and pursue different co-curricular leadership activities and experiences at UCSB. And some of my formative experiences were being a part of student government, residential life, orientation staff, becoming a stress management peer at counseling and psych services. I was a resident coordinator for Santa Ynez, and I was also participated in 2 of the PLASIA, Asian American Studies plays that happened during that time. I learned how to find my voice and inner knowing bit by bit. And I remember one of my mentors from college, Glenn de Guzman, shout out to you, Glenn, I saw you in the audience. Glenn was my assistant resident director my freshman year in Anna Kappa. And I remember the night that he pulled me aside and said, Annalyn, I want you to be a part of Comp Hall, which was the student government, right, in the hall. And he said, I believe you could do this. I believe in you. I know that you could be a part of this group and you're going to just change things for the better. This interaction with Glenn totally changed my trajectory, not only at UCSB, but within my career. And when I think about the role and the privilege that I have as a leadership coach to work with leaders, I think about this moment a lot. So just as Glenn did that for me of being that wide-eyed, homesick 18-year-old in Anna Kappa my freshman year, I'm able to now champion my clients to go after, the career freedom that they want and to have different dreams for themselves and go after them. So overall, I had a great UCSB experience, but unfortunately, my gremlins were still there. And this particular one stayed with me my whole 4 years there. So even though I was slowly kicking ass in my classes, I was becoming my own leader, I was trying to find my own voice, I had a gremlin that I was very ashamed by. And this is one that totally haunted me throughout college. And again, this was the internalized racism and oppression that I felt within myself and that had been staying with me since I was 5 years old. So despite these challenges within myself, I'm proud to say that I graduated with honors, yes, in the new millennium of 2000. And I still had no clue what I'd be doing with my career at this point. I was so burned out from, academics and being involved on campus that I just moved to San Diego with 2 of my college friends and just tried to figure it out. So fast forward a few years, and in my reflection, I realized that I've done some pretty courageous things in my life. And I've faced some of life's challenges head on. So whether it was going back to school and getting my master's degree out of state in Colorado and virtually having no real friends or support at the time, whether it was ending a marriage with my ex-partner who I'd been with for 5 years at that point, having major surgery and being really scared and not knowing what the outcome was going to be, switching career paths from student affairs and higher ed to going more into the corporate world and focusing on learning and development within HR and, taking a lower ranking job at UC Berkeley and having to learn new skills in a new industry all over again. These are some of the moments and the life's challenges that were part of my journey. And it took courage to go against my comfort zone and to continue to do that inner work in order for me to step forward and to be a leader, not only in my career, but in all parts of my life. So I have another question for you. When have you taken a leap of faith? When things were unknown? When you believed in yourself enough to know that this was the right decision in moving forward? This is important to remember about yourself because you have done things in your life that was perhaps outside of your comfort zone, or you didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And you made it, and you could do this again. One of my most salient, recent, and important memories of when I took that leap of faith was leaving my job at Electronic Arts after 5 years. I established myself at the company as a senior manager within the talent development team at EA. And I was privileged enough to focus in on manager development and the strategy and the programs that went along right with that. I also helped establish our first Asian Pacific Islander employee resource group. And I served on the global team to be their advisor and their coach. And I learned so much about being a leader in a different way for a global company and finding my voice within HR and company-wide. And I was able to travel the globe and train our people leaders across the world. And it was an incredible experience. And about 2 to 3 years ago, I started to think about the possibility of what it would be like to break out on my own and to become an entrepreneur, to focus on doing what I loved, which over the years I realized was coaching others through their career and life challenges and designing and facilitating learning experiences and workshops for people to continue to grow and develop as leaders. But guess who came back to try and talk me out of pursuing my dream? Oh man, this gremlin was relentless. These fears that I would say the chorus of gremlins, there wasn't just one, there was quite a few that really tried to tell me some out-of-pocket things. So, don't leave a steady job during a pandemic and you love your boss and you love your team. Like, why would you ever leave them? And what if it's worse if you break out on your own? And sometimes my gremlin would go to sleep and it wouldn't terrorize me. I'd have a great day at work. I would be hosting a really inspiring DEI event, or I'd coach an amazing leader who was going through some pretty big transformations. The list goes on. So while I had these meaningful moments at work, I still felt like something was missing. So here's another pro tip for you. Let's talk about how to identify and even work with these gremlins. And here's the chorus. They're having a great time partying, and this could be like a scene from IV. And how do you go about doing this inner work? So while my gremlins were still there, trust me, they didn't want to leave me alone. I started to hear other voices. So call it intuition, one's calling, inner leader work, signs from the universe, however you want to label it. I started to tap into this inner wisdom, and it was getting louder and it was getting clearer as time went on. And I want to share a framework with you that has helped me through this process. And I'm going to go through each of these steps so that you can start, working with your gremlins, perhaps maybe even making friends with them and tapping into your own inner wisdom. So for example, this was a loud and clear message that was coming to me from my gremlin, which was, why are you leaving a good paying job? Just be happy where you are. And I realized that this likely originated from my dad. And I get it. I get why it may have been showing up. He has often been worried about my financial security and safety and taking care of my basic needs. And I own that I was also scared of this too. But when I started to quiet that voice and started to understand where these messages were originating from, my inner wisdom started coming out a bit louder. So things like, I have a deep knowing that something better is out there, and I'm going to lean in to my values of creativity and freedom in order to pursue the life that I want for myself. Or I know I have an entrepreneurial spirit. I've known this about me for a really long time, and I have what it takes to be financially successful. So going through these steps allowed me to listen in for my inner wisdom's messages. And they were slowly replacing the litany of messages from my gremlins. So pretty soon, I was able to flip the script on my gremlins. And this is important to recognize, that there is a way to turn your gremlins and send them off to long-term airport parking, as my coach Yannicka used to tell me. So when my gremlin was originally telling me something like, well, there's so much competition, why even try? I started to replace it with, yeah, there are a lot of people doing this work. And I know and I trust that I have unique perspectives and talents about me that no one else does. And there's more than enough room for all of us. I started to hear the wisdom and feel the freedom of, there will never be a perfect time. So I'm going to choose now. And I'm ready to fully step into the leader that I know that I am, and the life that I want to lead for myself. So while my inner wisdom started out as a whisper, it became more and more loud. And you'll start feeling this within you as well. It visits you quite a bit. And all of a sudden, your inner wisdom's frequency is so loud, it's so clear, it's so present and so apparent that you can't help but listen to it. And I knew that I needed to explore and start planning for my dream to become a reality in order for me to live my values. And honestly, be the example for those I want to serve. So what type of coach would I be if I didn't take the time to do the hard work and pursue what it is that I want to go after in this lifetime? What type of integrity would I have in coaching people to find the career freedom that they want, but I couldn't do that for myself? And what type of leader would I be if I didn't do the inner work within myself and be completely present for the people I surround myself with and the clients who end up hiring me? And as time went on, I started to hear different messages. So one of, you got this, and you deserve everything you want in your career and in your life. And the final one being, I believe in you. So just as my mentor, Glenn, told me that 25 years ago, I started to once again believe that in myself in a different way. And not only that, but I had an amazing group of people who supported and championed me to follow my intuition. So here's another pro tip. Get the support you need. I learned this early on in the process, that I needed to get the support from my circle of trust, my board of directors, or what I like to label as my hype crew. So when you're exploring and making a change in your life, it's so important to get the support that you need and maintain a community that can relate to what you're experiencing. So maybe for you, it's finding a group of folks who are also learning that new skill. Maybe you join that ukulele group in your town. Maybe you need to surround yourself with other new parents, or maybe you need to join a mastermind group of seasoned leaders at the company, so on and so forth. The point is, get your hype crew. So here we are. We're almost at the end, and I want to leave you with top 5 pro tips. And some of these I covered already, but I do want to go into more depth with ones that I haven't covered as well. So I mentioned this earlier. Make time to reflect and explore more about yourself. I want you to reflect on what's meaningful to you. What makes you feel most alive in the morning and excited to work on? And maybe it's less about chasing a title and it's more about the type of contribution that you want to make in this world. The second is to pay attention to your energy and what's going on with it. So how exhausted are you at the end of the day? Do you have the Sunday night blues and dread looking forward to the next week ahead? I want you to be still and to think about what's draining you versus filling your cup. And can you make the time? Can you make sure that you commit to yourself to slow down and to sink into what you really want to explore versus coming from very frenetic energy? You obviously know this is important to identify your gremlins and unlock your inner wisdom. That's what this whole talk's been about. I told you about my hype crew in the slide earlier. I also had a coach and a therapist to help me through my gremlins and their messages. And I will have to tell you that it is completely worth the investment in doing something like that. The last one I'll leave you with is to identify your goals and start making a plan. And sometimes this could be the hardest part. So moving from the fear and the stagnation to empowerment and becoming friends with the unknown is really, really tough. And I want to acknowledge that. And it could seem overwhelming. So take one step. So maybe that's reading one article from the industry that you want to explore. Perhaps it's setting up an informational interview with someone who's already in the field and doing the type of work that you want to explore. Maybe it is watching a YouTube video and hearing someone talk about how they got into ukulele and what inspires them. I know that I often got inspiration from other women entrepreneurs who had been there before me. And this allowed me to hear their story and to become less fearful and encourage me that I can also pursue this dream as well. So I'm going to bring us back to the beginning. And I want you to think about, what's that dream? What's that dream that you have for yourself? Look back at what you wrote down. Remember when I asked you this other question, which was, what's an obstacle that's preventing you from pursuing that dream? What is holding you back? And likely it's your own gremlin that's sending you some messages that you have to think about. Is this still serving you now? How is this affecting your mental and emotional well-being? And once you sit with this fear and start flipping the script on it, I promise you that things will start shifting. I'm going to leave you with one last question, and it's one that I haven't asked you so far. What's your inner wisdom whispering to you right now? Take the time to be still. Take the time to listen to it. It's that important. We started out, all of us, as students at UCSB, and now we continue on this life journey. And so while we all have different paths ahead of us, we have individual goals and dreams for ourselves as individuals. You deserve to explore and lean into your dreams and desires of what you want for yourself in this lifetime. Did you all have a favorite place on campus? Campus Point was my special place. So I often went there when I was overwhelmed or I needed to feel a sense of peace. So my question for you is, where can you access this type of feeling for yourself, even where you are now? This photo is a reminder for all of us that we're all lifelong learners who want to continue and grow in ways that align with who we are today and what we want for our lives. So after this, reach out to your network. Your community wants you to succeed, and I'm one of the many people who's there to help champion you and your dreams. So from one Gaucho to the next, I wish you all the happiness and career exploration and alignment in what you deserve in this life. So thanks for allowing me the time, the energy, the space to share parts of my journey with all of you. And I'm really grateful for this Gaucho community. So much love to you all. Go Gauchos, go UCSB. And with that, we're going to move into Q&A. I would love to continue to stay in touch with folks. So feel free to reach out to me via my website or find me on LinkedIn. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing at this point so I could answer some Q&A with Julie.
That was fantastic, Annalyn. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insight and helping us all process how to sort of take the leap and really follow our dreams and our passions. We have a few questions that came in over chat and through Q&A that we just like to just jump right into. The first one I really love is all about the hype crew, right? Such a great term. I love it. I hope I can borrow it with your permission. Awesome. So, how did you find some of your hype crew, and are there some tips on finding sort of those special folks that are going to help you succeed and move along your path?
Yeah, I was really fortunate to have some of the women that I featured on there already in my life who were entrepreneurs themselves. And I honestly, when I was going through these difficult moments of, I have so much fear, there's no way I could do this, I would reach out to one of them and say, hey, you're doing the type of work that I'm dreaming of right now. Can I just have a drink with you? Can we have coffee? Just so I could learn more about your journey and your process. And, and I would say, while I knew some of those folks on the slides, they've connected me with other people as well. So through my network, I was able to then, hear from another person that they knew to say like, oh, who's doing this type of work, who I knew you would get along with, I'm going to connect you with so-and-so person. And that's the thing that I forgot about, I think, in this process of networking, that people want to help and they want to see you succeed. And so there's no shame or embarrassment in doing that. If you come from a place of thinking about it of people want to be generous in spirit to help you along your path, then that's what's going to show up.
That's awesome. So this one comes from Jill, who is class of 96. She formerly worked in property and casualty insurance. So she thanks you for sharing your story. And she wants you to know she left her company about 13 years ago. And she wants to know if you have any recommendations for staying current with skills and being hireable for that next position.
Yeah. Jill, thanks for your question. And I don't know if I'm understanding this correctly, Julie, you tell me, but is it more about like if you wanted to jump back into a company or just how do you stay?
My sense is just how do you just keep your skills fresh, right? And even if you're going and pivoting away from that world, right? And how do you become hireable for that next job?
Yeah, I think part of it is reading up on some of the latest trends. So I know that I often read Harvard Business Review, or there's an article that I see that catches my eye that people are posting on LinkedIn. Like I've been definitely leaning more into LinkedIn nowadays. Kind of took a break from it for a while, but it's actually a really awesome place to hear what's trending and what people in your industry are also taking a look at and leaning into. The other thing that I would say is there are a lot of professional development opportunities, sometimes that folks offer up for free, especially now that we're still in this virtual space, many of us. And so I would also take a look at that, right? Because people will often offer like an introductory course or a way in which to entice you with other workshops that they are hosting later on. So those are another way to, one, continue to build your network, and to hear from those who are doing this type of work right now that can potentially get you really jazzed up and excited about moving into this new space.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think there are so many resources out there. LinkedIn is one of them, definitely. We have the Gaucho network here through Alumni Affairs, and there's some really amazing alumni who are willing to help and answer questions. So that may be a really good way, Jill, for you just to connect with folks in industries that you're interested in exploring, right? And asking those questions like, how do I stay current? What more do I need to learn? So if you're not already on there, I strongly encourage you to hop on and register. So my next question for you, Annalyn, was there a defining moment when you decided to make the leap?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So it was something that I've been thinking about, as I shared, for 2 to 3 years. But I do remember there was this point I was driving back from LA. I hadn't seen my family during the pandemic, and I was driving back up to the Bay, and just something was sitting in my gut of like, oh God, I feel like I need to really make this decision whether I'm going to stay at EA or leave. And what happened to me was that Tuesday, after Memorial Day, I received an email from my manager at the time and said, like, here are our team goals. Here's what everyone's going to be working on. I want folks to weigh in. And at the time, I was working on the things that I had requested over the years, which was individual contributor, development and career development for ICs, along with focusing on the coaching strategy company-wide. And yet, even with the things that I had asked for and desired, it still didn't feel like it was enough. And when I got that email, like, my heart just sank, because I didn't feel like I was being truthful and having the integrity with my own values, which one is honesty, right? And authenticity. And I remember thinking to myself when I got that email, I need to have a conversation with my boss. So literally the next day on our one-on-one, I was like, I have to let you know what's on my mind. And I had already, mind you, been preparing with my coach, with my therapist, and other people in my hype crew to just peel the Band-Aid off, just do it, and because once you say it out loud, there's like no take backs, really. It was like, all right, I'm just gonna go for it. And that's what happened, and I was still very scared. And there were moments up until, the last week I was at EA thinking to myself, what are you doing? Why are you leaving this place? Like, why are you leaving your team? But I think that's all normal, right? Because we go through these stages of, being really scared of the unknown and being paralyzed with this fear. And, like I said in my talk, I think what really helped was activating that inner wisdom or your intuition, and following that gut feeling that many of us have, but we have learned to train ourselves to turn off, because we live in a culture that operates from the neck up. Like, let me just think of everything that's happening in my mind versus what's happening within my body, or like, what is my intuition telling me about this situation? And we've trained ourselves oftentimes to not listen to that. So my advice is to start listening to those whispers.
Such great advice. And actually, that's such a great way to end our Q&A. We are so delighted that you joined us to kick off the Expo. And I hope that everyone on this webinar got as much from your expertise and wisdom that I did. Thank you so very much for joining us.